First of all, the nice thing about a conference is that you meet people around the world. So, for instance, the Norwegian guy brought me some Norwegian regional cookies. So that's always a good opportunity to get some regional cookies. So, well, by the way, the thing is that Fiber 2.5 has a very, very exciting feature. In my opinion, beside the S&P improved capabilities, the continuous monitoring with the Trace API is, in my opinion, one of the most important enhancements. It's very, very useful. So, as far as I remember, Vlad did a session on the Trace API last year in Munich. I think it was a bit more technical oriented, how things have worked together, how the internals are working. What I want to do is, in respect being a tool developer, for instance, to have a better look on how you can use the Trace API from an end user perspective. So what I'm trying to do is I'm covering some monitoring approaches which are currently available in Firebird, including 2.5. Then I'm gonna talk about the Audit and Trace services in particular, so the new API for continuous monitoring. Then I will talk a bit about a new command line utility which is available across all architectures, across all platforms, the FBCase Manager command line utility. Holger will taking over the part in showing the Trace API integration in IBExpert, and then I'm doing a really shameless plug about a new product called FBCase Manager, which basically exposes the new Trace API for the end user in a very, very user-friendly way. Well, the motivation is, in respect to monitoring, is that keeping track of database operation is possibly the #1 requirement for database administrators. So monitoring helps you to identify problems and possibly even guide you to a solution. So, for instance, if you have a poor execution plan, you are able to analyze that and probably create a new index or something like that. So while a snapshot of the current database activity is useful, like we have it with the monitoring tables, very often we need a history of executed statements for really analyzing a problem. So continuous monitoring provides you with a stream of trace events over a period of time. Well, the continuous monitoring, the continuous stream of trace events is exactly what the Audit and Trace Services API was made for. So finally, thanks to Nikolai, Redsoft, Vlad, we are able to really continuous monitor a Fiber database. So that's, in my opinion, a great win. Well, typical use cases for continuous monitoring. Let's say if you want to know the number of executed statements in a particular time period, or for instance an execution trace for an in-house or third-party product without adding any additional trace logic into the application, because you can't keep a hang on the third-party application. Yeah, to spot suspicious statement types like commit retaining, defending, advancing the oldest interesting transaction or the transaction counter stuff. Well, you also could use continuous monitoring for a load planning. So if you have some usage statistics over time, you probably can make a decision about if we have to upgrade a server or something like that. Well, and if you have been in the business of being visited by a security auditor, you may run into problems if you don't have a trace on what happened in the database and regarding access tables and so on. Well, there are a lot more use cases where continuous monitoring is useful. The monitoring approaches, I would say the basic requirements for monitoring is it should be continuous, it should be server-side, and it should be configurable. There are third-party tools available which can act as some kind of intercept of any Firebase API client calls, but it's usually run on the client. So the server-side thing is pretty important here, and well, it should be configurable. So with Firebase 2.5, we now have 3 monitoring approaches which are server-side. The one we have for a pretty long time now is trigger-based. Then we got in Firebase 2.1 the monitoring tables, which give you a snapshot of the current activity, and the new audit and trace services. So usually in practice, based on your requirements, your monitoring requirements, you will have a mix of these approaches. A mix because if we do a quick comparison of the different approaches, we will see that they differ in some areas. Well, the trigger-based thing is usually, well, it's continuous, it's server-side, it's configurable by writing triggers. Well, you can't trace select statements, so you're limited to data manipulation operations, delete, insert, and update. On the other side, the monitoring tables introduced in Firebase 2.1 is not continuous. So every time you query the monitoring tables, you get the current snapshot of the activities which is going on in the database. So, but yes, it's server-side. It's, well, more or less not configurable. You have a fixed set of monitoring tables available, but you can monitor select statements. So you see select statements in the monitoring, and of course, delete, insert, update statement as well. The audit trace services fulfills pretty much every requirement here. So, but what the audit trace services can't do for you is to access the old or new field values if you want to log delete, insert, and update statements. So you also can't do that with the monitoring table. So if you have that requirement, you have to switch back to a trigger-based solution. Well, then there are different additional things like access to the execution time of a statement, access to the execution plan of a statement, which is not possible either in trigger-based or in the monitoring tables. But it is possible with the audit and trace services. So monitoring of database-wide operations like connect, disconnect is partly possible with a trigger-based solution because we got database triggers in Firebase 2.1 where you can write an on-connect or on disconnect trigger to log something. Well, it's partly available in monitoring tables. You will see the current active connections there, for instance. And, well, you also get that information out of the Audit and Trace Services API. The Audit and Trace Services API is a new feature. Well, it allows you to produce a trace of events in a chronological sequence. So there are different event types. I will call it event types. There are database-specific types and server-wide types. Database-specific types are connect, disconnect, start, commit, rollback of a transaction, prepare, start, finish, free of SQL statements, such stuff. So, and server-side things are usually services API requests. Let's say if you create a backup of a database with the services API, this is a server-wide event type. We have to differ between a system audit and a user trace. The system audit will be started by the engine upon the Firebase server starts. So every time you start the Firebase server, a trace is started and stored in a trace output in a text file on the server. You can activate the system audit by setting a new configuration parameter in the firebase.conf file. So if you set this value to a text file to a trace configuration file, you're able to run the system audit the next time the Firebase server starts. On the other side, there's a user trace. A user trace needs to be started by a user manually. The trace output is read by the initiating application, fetching trace data via the services API, and well, it doesn't restart automatically if you restart the server. So you, as a user, you have to restart the user trace every time manually. Well, and there can be several user traces per Firebase instance. On the system audit side, there only can be one system audit per Firebase instance active at any time. Well, there's one pre-installed. Well, this all is done internally, plug-in able. So there is one plugin available which resides as a DLL or a shared object in your Firebird plugins subdirectory, which basically has implemented the following trace output. You will see here that you have an event type that a trace has started. An event type is attached database with some detailed information. Another one is, well, there was a transaction started with detailed information like the isolation level, if there's the no wait option, if it is a read-only transaction or not, prepare statement, and so on. So there are a lot of configuration, a lot of event types available. We will see that on later. The trace configuration is configurable by providing the trace facility is configurable by providing a mandatory trace configuration. This can be either, if you are starting a user trace, you can either provide that when running FBCase Manager, the command line utility, or by providing a file. The trace configuration, you can customize your database-wide events, so you are able to specify what kind of event types you are interested in, and the same on the server-wide events. Well, basically, a trace configuration can have a default database section, which is valid for any forthcoming database which has a pattern. A pattern, this is a regular expression following the similar to predicate introduced in Firebird 2.5, which allows you to specify what databases you want to be included in the trace. Well, and there's a maximum of one services section for configuring the server-wide events you are interested in. Well, there's one pre-installed configuration file available if you install Firebird. So this text file is a very good start for writing your own trace configuration if you are using the command line utility. Well, a very simple example. For instance, we have our globally defined database section here with will tell we are interested. We want to enable for tracing for all databases. Then we have a particular section on one database, and we override that global setting with false. So for this particular database, the trace won't happen. On the other side, there is another database section here. This database will be traced, and we are interested in logging only or tracing only connection establishment event types. I have a very simple example. Well, there are a lot of configuration parameters here. I won't go through the entire set here because there are commented there are commands in the pre-installed Firebird fbtrace.conf file. There's also an article available which goes through these settings here. So, and pretty much the services configuration parameters as well. From a developer point of view, if you're in the business of, I don't know, implementing IBDSC or a FIB Plus or something like that, you have to use these new services API calls for starting a new trace session, stop a trace session, suspend a trace session, resume a trace session, and list all trace sessions. So if you are in the access component creation business, this is the new services API calls you have to use for integrating the services API trace stuff in your application. The security, every user can start a trace session. You have to use a Firebird username when connecting to the services manager on the server. And this used username influences the way how security works. It basically defines the privilege in respect to managing other trace sessions and the visibility of traceable statements. So in case of privilege, if you are starting a trace session, well, if you're connecting with sysdba to the services manager, you are in some kind of God mode, so you can manage all other trace sessions, including a system audit, so you can suspend it, resume it, stop it, or something like that. If you are non-sysdba users, they only can manage their own trace sessions. It's pretty much the same for the visibility of traceable statements. So a user trace session started by sysdba logs all activities from all users and connection. despite if you don't have defined a filter in your trace configuration file. And pretty much the same applies for a user trace session started by a non-sysdb user. It logs only its own activities identified by the username. Well, let's have a look on the FBCrace Manager command line utility, which is new. Let's see. For instance, if you want to list the currently available trace sessions, it's simply a call using the new FBCrace Manager command line utility with attaching to the services manager using providing a username and password and the option list. So if we are running this one here, we will see that no current user trace sessions, no trace sessions are actively started yet. So if we want to start a trace session, we have to call the command line utility with a few more parameters. We want to start it. We give it a session, an optional session name, and there's the config option, which basically points to a configuration file. So if we open this one here, we will see that we are interested in tracing a database called tourism.ftb. Well, it's enabled, and we're interested in tracing connection events and transaction event types. So if we start this one here, we will see that the client application is in some kind of idle mode. So it basically waits for receiving events from the engine. So if we are, let's say we are connecting to the tourism database, or disconnect here or whatever, connect again, we will see that we basically have configured in our trace configuration file that we are interested in tracing connect establishment or starting transaction or transaction-based events. So we will see here an attached database event type, start transaction with, depending on the event type, you will see different detailed data. If we go back here to querying the currently running trace session, we will see that the session name, the user who has started the trace session, and a few more flags. So you also can suspend a currently started trace session by using the suspend option and the trace session ID. So if we use this one here, it's gonna be suspended. So if we go back to our, well, that's the trace list, to our trace session here, and we go back to our client application and we connect again. Well, there's one trace finished event type, but after that there's no other entry, no other trace information available here. And you also can, of course, resume the trace session. So if we go back here, and I have to adjust the trace session ID. If we are resuming the trace session here, and we go back to our output here and do again something here, we will see that things are starting again in respect to tracing. So that's a very, very powerful thing here to get a hang on what's currently happening. And don't forget that's really a continuous monitoring. You get a continuous stream of trace events. That's the important thing here. Well, FBCrace Manager is just a command line utility, and it opens a market for third-party tool developers to pick up a new Firebird engine feature and build around, for instance, a commercial product. So what we want to do now is Holger is showing the trace API stuff in IBExpert.
As we always try to be really on time with new features that are available in Firebird, we also have already implemented the functionality to monitor the same functionality that is done by the Trace API, for example. And I simply want to show you how to use the user interface here inside. It is implemented here in this menu item. And it's only available in full commercial version, not in the personal edition. So you will definitely find out that there are some limitations in the personal edition. And I simply add here some informations like localhost / username sysdba, password, the typical password. And I can set some default settings for this new trace session. So, for example, I can automate the created username. I have the username here. I can say, okay, this time I want to use the following port here. I can select a different file as a client library file. You have the possibility to switch from having the output to the screen or directly to a file or combine both informations. And here you can simply say what are the typical default settings. For example, here's the possibility to find out about what database name should be monitored. And in this case, I simply write down the whole string to the database in this case. And you can also do it with parts on it only, db1.fdb. Here are the possible options, trace database events. You can set a specific connection ID so that you can simply have a look at only the data from one specific connection. This is extremely important when you have 100 users on a database server. The trace file will definitely be useless in less than a second. So you will have only, for example, the possibility everything else that is set to 0 is exactly the number that you see within the current connection option. Which number you want to monitor, you can also find in the monitor tables. You can see here an include filter, exclude filter, attach log events, and so on. A lot of parameters that are possible to be filtered here. BLR requests, maximum length of SQL strings logged, for example. The default here is 300 byte. For example, if you have a SQL statement that takes 4K or something like that, your log file might be also really great. So in this case, we have simply set the default value is 300 bytes for every SQL statement. And you can here say some more additional functionality. And now the session is started. And when I go here, for example, to a SQL command window, I can have a look at select star from RDB $database. And you see here the results. The trace session is started. The interface is almost exactly the same as we have in the FBCrace Manager API. Until now, we have not chosen to create a specific graphical version to display all the data. I think Thomas will show you in the next tool. He will just show you regarding the Trace API some more graphical usage, but you can read here everything that is really important. And I already found a lot of things from customer applications where the customer had a look at this Trace API file and he said, where is this SQL statement coming from? And I always said, definitely from your application. And often a lot of components create really strange SQL statements for background jobs and you are not aware of them. In this case, for example, here we say that we have here, for example, a statement that can be created by IB Expert in the background, and there are a lot more statements than you expect, perhaps. And this might be sometimes a really helpful thing to understand what your application does and why your application might be a little bit slower than you expect. So we have here a really nice, from my point of view, really nice feature inside Firebird that can be extremely easily be used to monitor also, as Thomas already said, to monitor also applications that you have no source code for. And in a lot of situations, you have the possibility to create some new indices or simply delete some indices. because sometimes it's better to delete an index, but better than creating 100 indices on the table or whatever people already did. So this is a basic overview here, and we can create new sessions when we have the session list. We have the possibility here to define the sessions, and everything that can be set here can be set as default automatically. So, for example, if I have here the database name inside, I can directly already have the database name as a default for my configuration. And it allows you to monitor this Trace API interactively. You have the possibility here to stop this, to resume, and to pause the trace session, and so on. So it is a graphical interface, but not graphical data displaying here what you can do with the Trace API. And this was already, I think we have it already since half a year or so inside IB Expert, perhaps already since almost 1 year. I do not remember exactly when we implemented this. But without using Firebird 2.5, you will not even see this menu item. It's extremely important that you register your database with the Firebird version 2.5. Otherwise, you will not see this menu item. So, okay. This was it from my side, and back again to Thomas.
Well, the next product is it's really a shameless plug for a new product we are developing. It's called FBCase Manager, and basically it allows you to work with the new Trace API very efficiently. So it comes in different editions. There's a freely available light edition, which is basically a replacement for the FBCase Manager command line tool with all that stuff in registering a server, registering projects for later reuse. What we see here now is the Enterprise edition. First, you have to register a server. You have to register a server just with the regular attachment information when connecting to the Services Manager. Then you have to connect to this one here, and then you're able to define a project. Basically, a project is pretty much what we've seen from Holger now, enabling which kind of trace events you are interested in with applying a field on something like that. Holger told about that already. So with a project defined here, you are now able to run this one here. So what you see now here, that a trace session started, and you will see that we get a list of trace sessions here, which you also can suspend or you can resume it again. So let's see if we are going into a client application, and we will see that there's already something happening. So if we do a select count star from, I think it's the analytical database, yeah, we will see that the select count star results in the following trace here. So that's pretty much the thing you have seen with the command line utility. For instance, you get the textual output of your trace. What we have built into this application now is a context-based parser. So we have tried, it's a little bit a hard thing to do, but we have tried to reverse engineer the trace output here by reading the original source code and, well, by doing tests and trying to capture any event type, so that we were able to define to write a parser which basically transfers the textual output into a more table-style output. So you will see, depending on the event type, for example, the start transaction, you will see which remote process name, it's the command line utility executing the SQL statement, the isolation mode, the wait mode, so transaction-specific stuff. We also have here, in case of a prepare statement operation, the execution time in milliseconds. And, well, we have, for instance, if it is a statement, we have the SQL statement parsed, we have the plan, the execution plan parsed. So that's a very a very powerful thing here, which allows you to work with the trace API very efficiently, especially if it comes to reading the trace output in a structured way. FBCrace Manager ships with a Fiber 2.5 embedded engine with a Fiber database, so you are able to store either the parsed records here in a Fiber database, which ships with FBCrace Manager, or you also have the possibility to simply store the raw output. So if we go into the browse module, we will see that this is our server name. So with our project, we will see that there is a trace session started by using this configuration here at the time when we started the trace session. And you will see here in the FBCrace Manager database the trace events stored in regular Fiber tables. So this allows you to fully explore the captured trace data in a SQL-like way, either with a front end like the browse functionality here, or with any tool like IBExpert or whatever to query those trace tables. What we have also built into is a reporting functionality, so you can define and design your own report. There is one report pre-installed you can use, or you can adjust, or you can duplicate to create your own reports. For instance, if you are interested in running a report which gives me a report on what kind of event types have been occurred, how many times, you're able to run that. So you have a tree-like structure here to define your report structure. You have to define a select statement which is used for when designing the report, and you have to provide a report file name, and then you are able to for instance design report. We are using here like IBExpert. We have also integrated here Fast Report as report engine. So that's very, very powerful. We will talk a bit on the different editions a bit later on, what is included in what edition. The next thing here is that the analysis tool, it's pretty much, if you have been joining one of the OLAP or data warehousing session yesterday, you are also able in this product to analyze the stored, the persisted trace data in an OLAP style view. So what you have to do here is now you really have only just to provide a SQL statement. There is one view in the FBCrace Manager database defined, which basically joins the trace data tables with all fields. So you have pretty much all fields available in this view. So what we are able to do now is if we build up the cube here, we will see that we will have this kind of ad hoc functionality in querying your trace data. So for instance, this is a very simple thing like the report one. So we are able to say that on December 21, there has been 94 event types traced. So for instance, if we want to split that up into what event type, there is a list of field names from the trace data table here. We can put that into here, and we will see that split it up and aggregated and something like that, what kind of event types happened how many times. And there is a very, very long list of possible fields here you can switch into it. For instance, I don't know, the remote process name, for instance, might be interested as well. So we see that, well, we had used Database Workbench. We have seen here, was this guy here. Well, there was ISQL used for issuing a prepare statement and something like that. So that's very powerful. You also can well, filter by particular fields. For instance, if we go back to the event name and we don't want to have all event types included here, so we just want to have, I don't know, commit retaining we will see that there has been 10 commit retaining happening at some particular point in time, namely on that date. So that's pretty much the all-up functionality we also have seen yesterday in a different application area. What we are working, well, we have released version 1.0, I think a month ago. We are working on 1.5, which basically has support for tracing services API requests. So you are able to parse services API requests. So if you back up a database or something like that, we are able to parse that as well. And another more exciting feature is called event processing. Event processing is just think about if you have the parsed statements here, and you want to get, I don't know, particularly notified or a different visual experience. For instance, if the execution time is greater a particular value. So we are able, by doing this with a scripting engine using Pascal script. So what we are doing here now is we can create a new event rule. We say, I don't know, row coloring or cell coloring. We will extend it probably over the time. We currently support 3 rule types to either color a cell with a particular color or formatting. So if the font should be bold of a particular cell or the entire row, depending on particular conditions, then we are supporting that as well. And an alert window, so if a condition is fulfilled, then we are able to pop up an alert window. So we are coloring a cell here. We will see that if we are used to triggers, we also have some kind of rule position to define the firing order of different event rules. So what we are doing now is, based on the rule type you have chosen here, you have predefined FBCase Manager constants, field values, so you can access field values of a parsed trace data record. So, for instance, if we want to have, let's say, cell coloring, execution time should be something along, 1 millisecond, so we get at least something here. You have to compile that. Then if we go back to our trace sessions here, to our trace output here, we have to reload the event processing rules. So, and now if we are going back to our client here and execute this one here, we have defined one event rule, which basically says, just give me a red row here in the grid if the execution time is greater than 1. So that's very useful to see just here if something happens according to your event rules. You have, with the scripting thing here, you have the full capability of a Pascal scripting language. So, and with the predefined constants and variables and functions here, you can really define really crazy things in respect to your conditions, what you want to define if you want to have a different experience. So let's say if we duplicate this one here and we want to show an alert window, we're gonna see that one here. We have a code catalog here. We ship a few examples here with the product, so you can easily start with the scripting thing here and insert this one here, and we also say again, execution time greater 1 millisecond. We want to pop up an alert window. So we recompile this one here. We reload the event processing here. And if we do that again, execution time, let's see if we have another one here. We will see that our event processing engine pops up an alert window, basically providing us with the text we have provided in our scripting code. So that's, in our opinion, very, very useful to get notified immediately if something along your conditions is happening. So that's very useful, yeah. Well, as said, you can disable a rule, you can reactivate the rule. There's also the idea to add more rule types over the time, for instance, sending an email or something like that. So that's very, very nice. Well, talking about the product editions. We have 3 editions available. The one is the Lite edition, which is freely available and is pretty much the thing, some kind of replacement of the FBCrace Manager command line tool, and pretty much respect the output of, for instance, IBExpert has as well. It also includes the possibility to store the raw data. The Lite edition doesn't include the trace data parser and other stuff like reporting, OLAP, and the event processing. So the standard edition is a bit more, but it also lacks in the ability to have the analysis module and the event processing module. And the last thing is the Enterprise edition, which basically will have any feature we will build into the product. So I think we are pretty good in time now. So, well, that's a very short demonstration on the product. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I've again collected some resources for you regarding the Trace API usage. Well, there are the release notes. There is the session by Vlad from last year from Munich. Well, and Audit and Trace Services article either in English or in German, and IBExpert with the Trace API integration and the FBCrace Manager product. So thanks for listening, and if there are any questions, feel free.